Here we are again, driving and talking. Let me turn that air conditioner down so it's not blasting you out of the car with me there. I'm Mark. Thanks for joining me again, or for the first time. All are welcome here. No judgment, because I would say it's just me and you, but technically it's just you. Well, taking that into consideration, on the INFJ platform, uh, these videos should be much more popular than they have been. If it's just you, and we are so uh, adversely affected by anybody that is not us, then I should be doing much better than I am, or my views should be doing much better than they are. So today, or right now, rather, I want to touch on another facet. And if you haven't figured out by now, the facets are endless. This is not a diamond. We are not in the rough. We are cut and polished quite well. It's the rest of the world that we have to contend with. So this is not a diamond. There is not a finite number of facets to discuss and then the subject is over. As I said before, we could talk about INFJ and loneliness, regret, guilt, how to get through just one day at work, much less years. We can, the facets are endlessly multiplying. That's where another facet is spirals, right? So we could spiral about not just spirals, but about everything else. There could be, I would have to write them down because I can't bring them up fast enough to speak on all the different facets that there could be. I could do a half-hour video just naming off different facets. But this one is going to be about another facet of that loneliness, and what makes it kind of a cage that we live in. We can't help it, so it's not curable. I said once before, if it was curable, then, if it was a microchip, we'd just pull that sucker out, put a new one in, and problem solved. But it's a lot more complicated than that. One of the loneliness traps that we kind of set for ourselves. Like I said, it's not our fault, but we're hardwired with it. So it's just something we have to try to manage the best we can. But that would be parental, or I can't say this word. Familial is the closest I can get. That's just a word that just doesn't agree with me. So in the family, or specifically today as a parent, and the guilt we as INFJs go through just for the part that we play, or maybe it's the lack of part that we play, or or the perception of the lack of part that we play. So for me, my whole life is I could write a book on perceived responsibility and perceived guilt. So as a man now, as a male, we've got, and I know that women deal with this too, it's just in different ways, and I can't intelligently speak on it much. I'll try to touch on it, but or make those connections where I see them, but I stand firmly on that. I have no right to an opinion where a female's point of view is required to understand. And I don't think any other man is either. I think any man that says, well, you know, and there's a few controversial subjects that I'm not going to bring up here, but, you know, if a man says, well, you know, a woman should or should not, well, see, the man is in the wrong already. He shouldn't have an opinion about that. I mean, if it crosses the line of male female, so if a male is just as capable of doing it, let's say, you know, let's say driving drunk, then of course everybody has a right to an opinion on that. But if it's strictly a female issue, men they don't have a place. Sorry guys, you just don't, and you shouldn't. And you should be happy with that, and you should be I'll tell you, it'll make you a lot more popular with the ladies, as we used to say, with the ladies, if you will stand on that hill and trumpet that every chance you get. Women, if you mean it, don't use it as a tagline, but if you mean it, then you need to express that openly, because there are not enough men that are comfortable in that area, and women see that, I can assure you, on both sides, whether you're comfortable or not, women can see it. So I have no opinion where strictly you'd have to have a woman's perspective, but I will try to touch on it just so that I can sound a little bit smart. Men are, as boys, we are, a lot of us, not all of us, but a lot of us are imbued with a sense of responsibility to add up, or to make the grade, to clear the bar that has been set for us with room to spare. And it's just something that I know there's a whole lot more absent fathers today than there were when I was a kid. But even then, there were still absent fathers. And that's a tragedy in itself. I'm a believer in the traditional, and I think I can't say most, but a lot of INFJs are more traditionalists as far as the relationship dynamic. Now, can you bring up successful children with one parent? Absolutely. Can it be either parent? Most definitely. Can it be two female or two males bringing up a successful child? Absolutely. It just so happens that I grew up in a traditional household, and so my values are such, even though my children especially my youngest daughter, did not grow up in a traditional household. She did until she was about 10, and then the relationship exploded, and she was in the middle of it, And I mean, not as an active part, but she was left to try to pick up her own pieces at that young age. And so, it in my perfect world, the way I see my own individual perfect world, I'm not talking about the one everybody else lives in, but in my idealist way, I see that's what it looks like when an idiot pulls out in front of you. I'm gonna leave that in because I wonder sometimes if I'm paying enough attention to what's going on. Obviously, I am. I got a good mind to follow this idiot. It's Sunday. You're not supposed to be jerking the car out into the road in front of other people. You're supposed to sit there until it's clear for 4 miles both ways. At least that's what everybody does when I am behind them, right? And I'm sitting behind them at a stop sign. It's like, it's clear for 2 miles. Why are you still sitting there? The answer to that question is because it's Sunday. So here we go, wrapping back around after my let's make it as dramatic as possible, right? Because it's after the fact now. My near fatal car accident. All right, so it's just that the way I see the world, probably mostly because of my programming in early childhood, is a mother and a father, bringing up their children, and that's just the little box that my head lives in. But like I said, I am acutely aware that there is no metric really for successful children, which I am also acutely aware of now that I have gotten to be 50 and have failed at everything I have ever done. I mean, literally, every job, every relationship, fatherhood, absolute miserable failure at all of them. The only thing that I got anything out of, or that I feel like I did semi-well, was some relationships while they were still good, and my children. See, I got 2 kids out of it, so I can't say that relationship that created those children was a complete failure, because I got my kids out of it. And I wouldn't take anything from my kids. I'm happy if the only payment that I got for all of the heartache and the insomnia and just the heart-crushing job of being alive, the only thing, if the only thing I got out of it was my children, I have been well paid. I hope that one day I can have a little bit what I would consider a little bit more normal relationship with both of my girls. It's a little strained right now, and that's just something that we all go through. I went through it with my dad, with my mom, at different times, oddly. But getting back to it, as a dad to boys, now I've got girls, but as a dad to boys, that father looks at his kids and wants to see certain things out of that child. Now that's an expectation, that's a bar that has been set that needs to be met by the child. Now, whether we realize that we are actively doing that or that we realize that our parents actively did that is something else, because that may not even be a real thing to the parent. The child may have perceived, like I know I did, I perceived that there was a lot more weight. There was quite a bit of weight put on me by my dad, and that's the case with a lot of father-son relationships, especially early on. But I put a lot more weight on that myself. And as an INFJ, I've got to realize that that's my weight. And I did at some point. My dad died several years ago, but we were able to reconcile our relationship. We understood each other, which was the most important thing, is just understanding each other. And I started learning to give more latitude, which is what I talked about in another video recently, was giving more latitude in your family. So try to do that, try to be more forgiving, because they may not even understand us, even though we're in that family and we've always been that way and that's just the way we are. They still may not have an understanding of it. They may understand that's the way you are, but they may not be able to find understanding so that they can be empathetic. So give your family that extra latitude, that extra understanding, the extra patience that they deserve, because they're your family. And they're the only one you're going to get. And you are definitely the only you they are going to get. So this responsibility and this guilt, I have a tremendous guilt for not being enough of a role model, because of the things that happened, the things that were happening in my life when my children were younger, whether I was working and was unhappy in my job and was just a complete ass, because it's hard to unplug from one thing and plug into something else and be who you're supposed to be when you can't recharge, when you can't get away and recharge. So but I have a tremendous amount of guilt for that, for my oldest daughter, because I just don't feel like I was who I should have been as often as I should have been him. And then my younger daughter, I allowed the marriage, I say I allowed, in my own head, I hold more responsibility for that marriage ending. And so I carry the whole responsibility for that, even though it's not primarily it's not my fault. In fact, in years after now looking at it, I would say that I bear far less than half of the responsibility, because there were, there were outs and there were things that could have changed. And, uh, when somebody makes an unacceptable decision, whether it's you or somebody else, then that decision is going to have consequences. And unfortunately, sometimes, as I have preached for quite some time, ask my oldest daughter, she'll tell you I've preached this since an early age. The decisions, and she's probably finishing the sentence without me at this point. Just all I have to say is the decisions. The decisions you make affect the people around you. And it really is true. So even though I was not making the decisions that ended the relationship, I still hold guilt and responsibility for the relationship collapsing, because I feel like I drove my ex to make those decisions. If I would have just been different this way, or if I would have, done more of this or less of this, and you know how it goes. But we can't get caught up in that. The facts are the facts. And yeah, we can hypothesize from now until the cows come home. But that's not going to, we will never solve that, because that's a spiral in our own head. We can't say, well, yeah, but. See, there's another one, yeah, but. That's how we continue to spiral. Well, yeah, but if I would have this or that or the other, then it would have been different. Well, yeah, it would have been different, but that doesn't mean that the outcome would have been any different. It may have played out differently, but that doesn't mean the outcome would have been any different. Maybe, we would have just drug it out another year instead of it ending where it did, So I hold a tremendous amount of responsibility that I don't have rightful authority to take, or rightful position to take, because those weren't my decisions. Those were somebody else's decisions. And the relationship ended, and my youngest daughter ended up without a dad when by the time she was 11, then she was without a dad inside her home. And I hold, like I said, I have a tremendous amount of guilt associated with that. So those are the types of things that I'm talking about, where that makes us lonely. Okay, those types of things, spiraling in those directions and protecting ourselves from new relationships, or just trying to do the right thing in the relationships we already have. We spend so much time analyzing and trying to do the right thing in the relationship we have, and we do have a tendency to get a little ultra focused or hyper focused and do one thing over and over again, convinced it's the right thing to do, but really it's not, because if it were, it would have had results by now, right? So we get stuck in that insanity loop, and you know what I mean by that, doing the same thing over and over again. So we get stuck in that insanity loop because we are convinced that that's the right thing to do. And maybe for somebody else looking at us, that would be the right thing to do. However, we're not dealing with us, we're dealing with the outside world. So what kind of guilt do you have? What kind of guilt are you carrying? And let me express this. I do realize that most of the guilt I carry with myself as being a father, or on the other half of a relationship, I do realize that most of that is perceived guilt. It's perceived responsibility. So it's my perception of what my responsibility should be, and it's my perception of what my guilt should be because of that situation. However, that's not always 100% accurate. Our perception, because we take on more than our fair share, trying to maintain the balance, then our perceived responsibility or guilt or sadness about a situation is probably 75% or higher of the total amount of guilt or responsibility that there is to be had. And why are we taking that much on ourselves? Why are we taking 75, 80% of all the decisions, responsibility for all the decisions and all of the inadequacies, and not leaving ourselves any latitude? Not being able to say, well, Mark, your job was hard, and it took a lot out of you. And when you got home at 1 o'clock in the morning and could not physically go to sleep until 3 or 4, then you needed to sleep until 3 or 3:30 in the afternoon, because you were waking up having muscle cramps I would say all night, but it was really all day. And, so there's nobody there fighting that side. Inside your head is what I mean, or inside my head. I don't have another voice going, well, yeah, but your job was really hard, or when this happened, you were so devastated that how could you have been anything but hurt and mad? How could you have mustered anything else? I can't. Other people, upon talking to other people about things that I have gone through in my life, they have said, and literally as close to verbatim as I can get, I don't see how you mustered the ability to just get through it without being completely broken and damaged. Well, that's part of our INFJ hiding the I'm not okay. We have a tremendous ability to do that. So maybe I am completely broken. Truth be told, okay, big reveal. I am broken, completely and totally. Every failure I've ever been through, including my marriages and the lack of success I have had with fathering my children. Now, they're good kids, but see, I'm judging I'm judging my success as a father with the relationship that I now have with my girls. So that is the metric I'm using, is the success of the relationship that I have with my girls. So all of that guilt has broken me. And I've got a bunch of other things that have had that type of massive impact on my life, and I view myself as a broken tool. I used to be the most useful tool in the box. I was the what did they used to call that thing? That multi-tool, you know, it was the pliers, and there's a whole group of people going, that the name is this. So 5 different times after I post this, I'll have the overwhelming urge to call out the name of that tool. I want to say it's a Klein or a Klein tool. Maybe that was just the manufacturer, but anyway, I used to be that tool. I was a pair of pliers. I was the Swiss Army knife, you know, before the Klein tool came out, or whatever that thing is called. Then I was the most useful tool in the box. I was the pliers, the screwdriver, the knife, the file, the can opener, the bottle opener, and the leather punch, and the corkscrew. And if you needed me to be, I could also be the tweezers and the toothpick. Now, I'm just a broken tool. Now I'm like a broken screwdriver. But see, my dad taught me when I was young, even a broken tool has its uses. So you're torquing on a wrench so hard that you bust the end of it open, there's still a use for that tool. We don't know what it is yet, but don't throw it away. That's a good hunk of metal that could be turned into something. And he turned a few broken hunks of metal into useful tools in his day. I've seen them. I now own some of them that are left over. So I feel like a broken screwdriver. Excuse me, I'm checking my time. I feel like a broken screwdriver. I still have a use. I don't know what it is, and neither does anybody else, but maybe we'll figure out what it is, and maybe I can serve some purpose. What do you feel most responsible for that you know you shouldn't? That's the catch. Do you even know you shouldn't feel that guilty about that? Are you even aware that you should not have that much guilt over responsibility that was never yours, that you stole from somebody else because you thought they couldn't handle it, or you thought because you were more capable as a human being than they were, that you should shoulder that guilt? Let me know. What responsibility did you fall down on? What guilt do you carry that you shouldn't, or you're not sure if you should? Because that can be its own whole thing. Let me know, because this has run too long already, but I've got another subject for you coming up. I'm still moving back and forth, so the last couple of videos, other than the one in the woods, or the one or two in the woods, I can't remember. Other than those, then I've been moving, so all this driving back and forth, that's why I have a half an hour. You know, if I had a real job, I could put out 2 videos a day every single day, then where would I be? Well, I'd have 2 videos a day every single day. So there'd either be a lot more people ignoring my content or being extremely bored with it. Leave me a like, a subscription, hit that notification, comment, let me know if there's something you want to see, or what I'd really like to know is what is that responsibility that, I can't even talk now, responsibility that you took too much of, or what is that regret or that guilt that you carry too much of, and you know you need to set some of it down, but you're just having trouble. I had trouble for years with these things, so don't think that I'm talking about them clear-eyed and it happened yesterday. These things happened years in the past, although, of course, with family stuff's always continuing to go on. So let me know, what is that guilt you carry too much of, or you suspect you carry too much of? Thanks for following along. We'll see you next time. My name's Mark. I appreciate your time, and hey, it's not really a lot of effort to push a button, so help me out.